know just how important that first map can be, and we know just how cheesy that mage can be.
I mean, it's tough. You know, we joke about it, but numerically speaking, if that mage, especially with Dilemma performing, like if they perform well, it's really tough to overcome that obstacle. We saw it happen, you know, in the last week. Rich, I don't even want to hear it
from personal experience. I'm just going to say it's not easy being cheesy. So this mage is going to have some very hard work here.
Fair enough. Both teams right away, of course, opting to use their invis pot, getting right to that first boss. A lot of the nasty trash that you really don't want to deal with, Jack. And I'm not talking about what's in your kitchen. It takes a ton. There's lots of mobs that add 75%, you know, resistance buffs. You got to interrupt heals. It's just a mess to deal with. Both teams getting right up to the Amalgam of Souls.
Well, fresh out the kitchen here, Dark Slashers going into Amalgam of Souls. There's Parse Culture not far behind them. They are, of course, engaging with that Forgotten Spirit off to the side there, giving that a little bit extra Sephuz proc, a little bit extra cleave damage maybe to be able to get that down. You are seeing Dilemma going down immediately due to, of course, the scythe that comes out from the boss there. They're getting that quick battle res onto him, so it won't be a huge deal, but besides just losing out on that Bloodlust timing, so they might be a little bit behind there, but you really hate to see it so early on.
I mean, it's not a huge deal right now, kind of by the numbers and the start of the dungeon, but it's something that really could punish them later, needing that battle as we know how dangerous, you know, Illusonic could be, and, you know, with one-shot mechanics. They do have the advantage, of course, of the mage. Another death going down on the side of Parse Culture. They get that battle res up immediately on the Windwalker. I'm not really sure what's going on. Not the most dangerous boss in the world. We typically don't see almost any deaths, amongst all the regional that we've seen. So both teams incurring a death here. Perhaps a bit of a brain fart, if you will, on their side. Nonetheless, they do have those battle reses to use, and they get the players up right away.
Well, at least, you know, at this point they're at equal footing where they're equal boss percentage basically, and equal in terms of lacking that battle res there. So at this point, yeah, it won't be too big of a deal, but we'll interesting to see going forward if there are going to be any deaths where they're going to be able to need that extra battle res or be able to kind of lean on that. I'm more worried about Parse Culture in particular, because Dark Slashers can just use their mage to be able to obliterate trash and bosses and things like that. But Parse Culture, because they are not running with one, are going to have to engage with those bosses and trash much longer and be at greater risk.
And they have that poor Windwalker, which we know is very susceptible to some of that cleave splash damage with the trash coming up before the second boss. We'll talk about that in a bit. Both teams now at 44% equal footing. We have entered the second phase where 8 spirits will spawn around the side of the room. One of them does get rooted on the side of Parse Culture, allowing this phase to kind of artificially extend to 15%, where the boss will then force the transition back into phase 1 with a huge hit on the team. Players will definitely need to make sure they have some kind of defensive or CD active, or else they'll have another death, and this time they won't have that battle res to back them up, Jack.
They won't have that battle res, and we're also on Tyrannical, so having those extra deaths, for example, when you are on bosses that just have so much HP to them, you know, even if you're having a death that's not going to, you know, be wipe worthy, it's still going to put you behind so much further because it'll be taking so much extra time to be able to get the boss down and be able to deal with here. So they really got to make sure they watch that soul, because I believe they did actually have that soul go into the boss very closely, because the cast started just a little bit over, but thankfully no deaths.
Thankfully no deaths indeed. Both bosses now reaching that sub 10% mark, after which they will start the RP, and, you know, the teams will have a moment to just recollect themselves before getting up to the first spire in the Black Rook hold. Dilemma kind of hovering around that 50% mark, having a bit of trouble getting out of that Grievous stack on the side with Edelweiss. I mean, that Grievous does stack up to 5. You have to get that player above 90% HP to get rid of that increasing dot damage. The bosses do fall on both sides, both teams, excuse me, now waiting at the door, getting ready to go up.
I like the decision by Edelweiss not to really put that much healing out onto Dilemma there. A lot of times what you will be running with is, you know, when you're running with Rejuve, Germination, be able to actually, you know, have the multiple rejuve stacked on the one target, you get into the situation where having double rejuves on a target just kind of stabilizes the target. They don't actually heal up the rest of the Grievous damage that'll require cultivation or you know, any regrow spam or anything like that to be able to clear it out. So at that point, you know, once you say, oh, I know that they're stabilized in HP, there shouldn't be anything else to hit to deal damage to them, I'm just going to keep on tunneling damage. That's a pretty nice spot to be at on a boss like that.
Both teams heading up to the spire right now. Tons of small spiders in this area. They apply a dot when they melee the tank with that shadow damage, so you want to make sure you get that dispel often on the tank. This is why you see the pre-AMS come up on Jason, FOTM. Of course, we know that stands for Flavor of the Month for that, the strength of the blood DK here. A lot of bursting damage on the teams. They do stabilize, and now they'll be working their way upstairs over to the larger spider and then into the hall. Big pull coming here for Dark Slashers, though.
Very scary to see, because they have all of those smaller spiders that are dealing with all at once, having to deal with all those huge bursting stacks as they're engaging with the rest of the trash packs here. A lot of pressure being put onto Edelweiss there as she does go down there. To be able to make sure you're keeping everybody up, and it's a ton to deal with. So right now, she has some time to be able to get back up the stairs, get back with the group before more bursting stacks go out, but that time window is very limited.
Yeah, and do largely well to deal with the bursting there, but there was a bit of a reapplication later, which caused the bursting to extend way beyond that 4-second timer, ultimately leading to that healer death. Does well, of course, to release immediately. We do have the checkpoint at that first boss room, runs back up, uses the dash on the druid, and gets back into shape. Fortunately, no more deaths during that time. Parse Culture is obviously working in a more traditional route, a bit slower with that big spider and that first patrol pull. Once they stabilize here for Dark Slashers on the left side of the screen, we do expect that we're going to see that huge mage pump up damage and then absolutely obliterating the hallway here.
Yeah, I mean, as you see, they're kind of clearing out the rest of it. Parse Culture is still kind of working their way up to the stairs here, and they haven't quite engaged the pull yet. So even before we even have any mage tricks coming into play here, Dark Slashers is looking like they're having a nice steady lead ahead of them. And they did an excellent job, of course, to be able to deal as much damage as possible before the champion's shout goes out, because that does provide additional HP based off of the current HP under the target. So the lower that they're able to get them before the shout does go out, the easier it's going to be able to eliminate those mobs quickly.
So a huge pull coming in here for Parse Culture, the entire hallway. We do banish the elemental on the side from the Warlock, as we saw earlier. The DK dips really low right away. We have that Purg proc, and the Windwalker fortunately gets away as well. The cat does get Control Undead cast on it by the DK, so they won't be feline all over the place, getting too much damage out. But Dark Slashers is just now buffing up Dilemma, getting ready for the big pull in the hall, where he will essentially just 5-shot everything in the hall if done properly. Parse Culture, LOSing, line of sighting everything around the corner, cleaning up the rest of the hallway, nothing too sloppy there, and getting ready for Shamalama Ding Dong.
Yeah, but you're seeing here, Rev's, the important part is going to be the positioning right here. You want to be able to make sure that all those ads are in close together. Edelweiss does an excellent job waiting for the mage's cast to be complete, knocking it forward with the Typhoon. That way, Dilemma's able to get in close enough to be able to actually continue the spell stealing that will be going on there. Great job in terms of the healing, be able to keep everybody topped off, even when, of course, you are having to deal with that cat. So the positioning there is strong. The healing is strong to make sure everyone's staying topped off here. They need to really watch Dilemma for that last tick. They do take care of him very well, and he's able to get that evocate, and he's able to completely reset his mana pool, get it back on top, and be able to continue on dealing this damage.
Yeah, so even though Parse Culture kind of dealt with this whole hallway faster, theoretically speaking, than Dark Slashers, the real advantage outside of the bosses is going to come here with the Commander coming down. Parse Culture is still working on it, but Dilemma's just going to start ramping up that damage and deleting most of this pack and opening the door for the last trash pack before Ilisana, the second boss of the dungeon. But Parse Culture really not so far behind. Both teams at 2 deaths a pop, so no advantage for either side there. But the real advantage, Jack, as we always know, I mean, we've seen this a ton now during the tournament, is going to come with that boss damage if done properly.
I thought it was going to be the friendship we made along the way, but I'll go with that as well.
Not
the boss damage. The boss damage you are able to have, in a lot of ways it does put you, at so much less of a risk towards, so much of the damage that goes out here. 23 on Tyrannical, when you're not having, Void or baseline onto your gear, things like that can be so impactful to, how much damage you'd be taking from Ilisana, from Smash Fight, and even from Dentalia next at the very end of this instance. So these bosses have tons of HP, but when you're able to, take that extra time to do the ramp up there, it does provide some considerable advantages. And Parse Culture so far has been doing an excellent job to be able to kind of clear trash at fairly equal rates as Dark Slashers. But at this point, as they're about to be engaging with the boss, they really need to get up quickly and get that head start, because if Dark Slashers has the time to be able to ramp up, they're going to obliterate her.
Parse Culture is slightly ahead now as they're starting to, or finishing rather with this trash pack, starting to finish it, as I was going to say. Cass getting quite low there, making sure to not let too much of that damage get out of hand, but Feral Dog going down here. They don't have the battle res active, so they're going to have to finish this trash off by themselves and then get the res from the Windwalker. So a bit of time lost here on top of the 5 seconds, of course, for the death penalty, allowing, I was just saying actually they're slightly ahead, but they really kind of just negated their lead here as Dark Slashers finishes off the trash and as well moves to Ilisana. Now, we're going to see a pretty big buff period where, we're going to have Dilemma sit there and get ready to buff and steal all the stacks and then just do a ton of damage to Ilisana, but Parse Culture is looking to pull as soon as they can here.
And they really need to be able to kind of, establish a strong lead going forward with this. We've seen a couple times, from this mage trick where, even if we saw Method NA, for example, staying ahead of the game or pulling the boss earlier, but when they're not able to have a mage, Limon's able to turn around the corner and be able to just deal so much damage to this boss and really start catching up. So at this point, Parse Culture's got to know, the different timings from especially Europe regions. It has to be confident enough to say, we don't need a mage for this, we don't need a mage for this series, we will just be able to kind of pull ahead.
Team doing really well there to deal with that that kind of fell rush, the dark rush there, making sure that not too much of the real estate is taken up in the area. The mobs do spawn now as they're kind of pulled out. Second phase here for Ilisana for Parse Culture, but here comes the mage damage train over on Dark Slashers in just a moment as they pull the boss. We see Dilemma just start skyrocketing above the other DPS, getting all of those Arcanist spell stolen stacks in, and just outputting as much damage now. To be fair, the peak that we've seen from some of the mages doing this trick is in the 20 to 25 mil range. I don't think Dilemma actually passed 18 mil there, so whilst it was a huge benefit for sure, it seems that, you know, sometimes they pulled off a bit more damage than that.
They have indeed, but at this point, the biggest thing is not about being, you know, the fastest time, it's just being faster than, of course, their opponents. You are still able to have that buff prolonged here as he's getting his next Evocate in, continuing with the spell stealing, and at this point, he's consistent, right? He kind of peaked out at 17 million. He stayed there for quite a long time. Edelweiss doing an excellent job making sure there's such huge, consistent healing staying on top of Dilemma here. This is kind of where he starts falling off, and some of the stacks have probably fallen off at this point.
But when you're at, boss is dead.
When you're at 15%, exactly, it doesn't matter.
The boss about to fall indeed over Dark Slashers, so this is the lead we were talking about, 30% difference between the two teams, but Parse really not out of this completely by any means. There's still a lot of dangerous trash coming up. We will see the mage doing this kind of trick on a Smash Blade, of course, and Italian Axe at the end, but there's a lot of trash in between. You can certainly, you know, have some problems with the gauntlet leading up to the third boss, so we'll have to see how the rest of the trash works out, but Parse Culture not too far behind, and we do have a death coming over from Malene as well, something you don't want to see. Fortunately, the checkpoint is right here for the teams. They don't have to waste a lot of time resing or even battle res. Well, they do have their battle res active, but they're fortunately able to just release right now and start heading up to the rock stairs of Mordor.
And in the nice time here, you've seen Parse Culture still at 20% left on Ilisana that they have to actually be taken down here. And there is still more of that threat. You know, what you've seen, I believe Malene and Glix actually did end up having to, you know, get the frontal by one of the champion ads, that Ilisana spawn. So they both dealt with that full frontal, and you did see Malene going down. But like you said, when you're at that, you know, 2-3% mark, that's the area, if any time, that you would be wanting to have the death, because you're able to burn it down, you have the reset there. And Dark Slash is in great shape, and I don't think they're even having to buff up the mage at this point. They're just nuking it down.
Yeah, no, we've seen a lot of the mages kind of just skip this and they go, you know what, other DPS, you do something for once. We do see the defensive nature coming out of the tank now, starting to kite a bit, getting that 70% slow from the death and decay down. Don't want too much of that damage coming in, especially from the Blade Lords, which do enrage when they're lower, on top of course, the blade damage that they do. You got to interrupt that before, after the channel, but, sorry, after the cast, but before the channel starts to get too out of hand, the Brutal Assault. Otherwise, it will recast once you interrupt or grip, what have you. Doing well here to keep LOSing, line of sighting, and getting out of dodge.
What I'd love to see, actually, was the positioning out of Rev. It was kind of a more subtle movement, but what he did is he actually hooked around the Blade Lords so that they would still cross paths with a lot of the scavenger mobs that were close by. And then when he had a little bit of an opening, he took quite a bit of damage to actually run past them, but he ran past them, put the Blade Lords back on top of the scavengers, and that adds so much to be able to have the extra cleave damage that you're going to be having. And that's the positioning that you really want to be able to have for your DPS to really make the most of it, like you said, when you're letting everybody else actually start doing some damage for once.
We see Rev likely wearing those that Agrimar Stride Legendary, quickly running up the stairs. I mean, those stairs have been scary for a lot of players lately. Those rocks can really hit you hard, and I'm talking about Dwayne Johnson here. I mean, there's not going to be any People's Elbow being cast, but they will kill you, stun you right outside of the match. Parse Culture doing the same pull downstairs that we just saw from Dark Slashers, and now the remainder of the dangerous trash, I would say, comes with this gauntlet. Some teams opt to kind of pull it here into this central foyer area, nuke down the Sigs Dominators, make sure you're stunning and interrupting them as much as you can so they don't get their AoE buff out. But Jack, the most dangerous here is the Sick Bats cast that these Dominators do on one player that causes this immense amount of small ads to just turn around and smack a player, as we see these eyeball debuffs above Malene and the Dilemma.
Yeah, and the positioning here is what is really making it so it's much easier for them to be able to survive, because the bats are all coming from Smash Bite's direction. They're standing on the exact opposite side, making sure that if any of those bats want to start coming towards Edelweiss, towards Malene, towards Dilemma, that they actually have to pass through the melee, they have to pass through the tank to actually be able to actually reach to them, so that, you know, gives you the opportunity to have group-wide stuns, slows going out to help prevent that, and it makes it so much cleaner to be able to pull off here. So excellent job in positioning. So
we're going to have about a 10-minute AFK now where Dark Slashers prepares their mage damage. Parse Culture doing a same pull, this time into the room rather in that central area that we saw Dark Slashers do. Having a bit of trouble, they did have a death go down, so they had to use their battle res, now up to 4 deaths on their side versus Dark Slashers 3. So another 5 seconds they're going to have to overcome. in a situation where it's already working against their favor due to the lack of a mage on their team with the strength of, with how strong they are in this dungeon. Finishing up the rest of the Dominators, which are quite large now as they've been getting a lot of those damage buff cast off, which is why you're seeing the tank be so defensive and kite away. Dark Slasher's just now prepping the mage train to get ready to leave the station.
To bring the pain.
Yep, to bring the pain.
Yeah, you're seeing here, they're just getting this set up here, and it's so important. A lot of the times, the mage trick would not be nearly as effective if not for some of these sugar-crusted fish feasts to be able to quickly regen so much mana for the mage very rapidly. And in addition, of course, to those evocates that will be going out here. So at this point, it's so important. You are seeing the Ishkar's Fellshoot emitter, I believe, going out onto the Dilemma, but he still does go down here. So he does lose all of his stacks, and while they burn down 40%, of course, of the boss's HP in the course of that Bloodlust duration, that still is such a huge loss when you're losing out on the mage's damage in the rest of the fight.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. That's a huge loss. Half of the Bloodlust is gone. All those stacks are gone. 5 seconds on the clock. Their second battle res is gone as well. This is really the kind of break that Parse Culture was hoping for. They'll have an opportunity to kind of overtake some of that time on the trash coming up. We'll have to see if they are able to kind of perform that up to par. The rest of the mechanics on this boss, since we often don't see them because the mages just one-shot them, there's a charge that goes on a player. Other players can't intercept it, and they get a debuff. That debuff increases the damage from subsequent charges by, I think, 100%, something like that. So you want to kind of split the charges between players. The tank does go down. Rev goes down right now. They don't have the battle res, and the Arcanist is now free because the Blood DK is the one that controls Undead. So this is an absolute nightmare for Dark Slashers. Full wipe coming down on that team. Parse Culture now at 50% on Smash Fight. This is looking grim.
They lost the mate, or they lost the caster. So if they wanted to actually go back towards it because it did reset, they need to go all the way back down 3 flights of stairs.
From Ilisana's room.
From Ilisana's foyer. To be able to get back up there. That's a disaster for them.
Yeah, so I mean, yeah, because they're resing here, they're not releasing at the checkpoint. You're absolutely right. So that's a huge problem for the last boss too. They're gonna have to play the rest of this dungeon like common mortals. The rest of the people who don't have the mages play. Parse Culture looking in a really prime position right now as Smash Smite is reaching the last third of his health. Not doing so well with the kind of guanos, spawning rather much of a satanic circle, if you will. Satanic star in the middle of the room. Yikes, not what you want to see from these teams. But actually, it's almost perfectly star, the Diablo star. So they do put him in the middle of the room. Now this is dangerous particularly because once that punt comes out, which already does so much damage, it will punt you back into this kind of no-no zone, and you really don't want to be there when you have about a 5 to 10% remaining health. But the player's doing well to get to a safe space with their backs to a wall for that next smash.
You're seeing for Dark Slashers, Rev is running, making a very long journey to make his way back to actually be able to get that Arcanist back so they could still take advantage of that buff here. And it's not quite over because you're seeing, even as we're going into... Are you sure? The production seems to think different as we're going full screen for Parse Culture here. Oh! I've seen Jason going so low here, 2%.
Oh no, the tank
goes down. Big Kent going down here. They're having the charge going out. They have a couple seconds left. Oh, so close.
Smash Fight with a vengeance, almost wiping both teams here. Fortunately, was low enough for Parse Culture to just finish off the last few percent of the boss. There's, of course, that Haymaker on the boss that we often don't talk about because, well, frankly, it never gets to that point where if he reaches 100 energy, he will actually cast Haymaker on the tank, increasing the tank damage taken by 100% for, I think, like 8 to 10 seconds, which is what you saw there. So much damage coming in on the tank. Fortunately, no wipe from them. Parse Culture will now pull this entire hallway, this whole, entire stairwell up with the Swordsman and, of course, the Lancers as well, opting to get out of that Raven's Dive, the Swirly, making sure you don't get that 5-second stun, and, of course, the Coup de Grace.
So tell me, Ted, I'm always watching out for the Raven Dive, right? But what does the Coup de Grace do?
The Coup de Grace, which I believe means cup of grass in French, is something that will do a massive nuke damage on the tank if not interrupted or stunned or gripped. So the tank definitely want to have some kind of CD, especially when you're pulling the entire hall. If you have 6 of those queue up together, it could be pretty lethal.
I didn't know grass was that lethal. Thank you for educating me, Ted. I appreciate it.
You're welcome, Jack.
Parse Culture here, moving their way back into Dentalian Axe's room here. You are seeing Feral Dog going down very rapidly. You're seeing Kent going down as well. They don't have any battle reses left available to them as they're trying to wipe out the rest of this. You might actually see the Warlock going down due to the bursting stacks here. You just see everybody so low as they're dealing with the last couple trash mobs right here. And at this point, they just have to release, run back, and be able to try to get back into this.
Yeah, so they do manage to somewhat stabilize 2 of the deaths coming up. We do know that they got the checkpoint at Smash Spite's room after they killed him, so everybody kind of just releases their runs back up the stairs. The last 2 mobs here reaching their 100% for trash, and they'll prepare here to pull Cortalos, which which once you get to 20% will start the transition into Dentalian Axe, the second part of the encounter.
Yeah, and at this point, the Parse Culture is just waiting for the Warlock to be able to get back into the group here. And this would be some of the opening that Dark Slashers really needs, and they do still have, of course, the cat that's left over here. So they might just look to kill the cat as quickly as possible.
Yikes.
Once they do get, once they do, of course, get buffed up by Dentalian Axe, once they pass through that first Shadow Ball volley there.
So we are seeing Dark Slashers back at Smash Sprite right now. We see the health, as it should have been the first time in their books, melting very rapidly with the mage doing the proper buff damage. Smash Sprite down to 30% now, but Parse Culture already starting on Cortalos. As we mentioned earlier, once that 20% mark is reached, a bit of RP will start where Dentalian Axe will spawn in the middle. And Jack, as we've talked a million times, I believe you just mentioned, death coming down here on Dark Slashers right now too. I mean, things are just looking bad. We have the Purg proc on the tank as well. I don't know, Jack. This is looking sloppier than the barbecue we just ate.
Maybe it is a trend with the first dungeons that Dark Slashers has been encountering with, because it does seem like once they get into their flow, they have some fantastic games ahead of them. But really, this should have been their setup, having the mage cheese, having the ability to be able to pump up their mage to such a high level there. And while they are having fast kill times, when they had it so greedy there where they missed out on the Arcanist because of the full team wipe there, they didn't actually have, an extra, maybe an external, maybe putting Bark out on Dilemma or something like that, or having something more powerful than just the tank spell shield emitter, is I believe what it was, because it was about 1 million or 2. Just having the complete one-shot on Dilemma really set them back so far.
So Parse Culture now starting the second phase here. We do know that this is probably the most dangerous point in the fight before the players get their 300% damage, healing, and health buff. That Shadow Bolt volley that you just saw go out, all the players use as much immunity and personal CDs, even external CDs, as possible to try to survive, because if you die during that and you don't have a battle res, or you're late to take your battle res, you will not get this crucial buff for the rest of the fight, so you might as well be dead the rest of the encounter. But no problems there for Parse Culture. They do get back into it. Dentalian Axe will go down for that first Dreadlord guy phase as well.
Yeah, at this point, Dark Slashers is, of course, engaging with everything all at once. Here you're seeing Rev's Purgatory.
Oh.
Rev does go down here. And this is kind of the desperate play that they just had to make. Is pull everything into Cortalos. And we've seen a couple teams doing this with an extremely powerful setup here. But if you're not able to, pull it off, I mean, that was just kind of the desperation play for him.
We did have the Warlock go down here on Parse Culture right now, but they use that better. I mean, that was just too much grass for them to handle with all that cup of grass. But it was all right in the end. Parse Culture looking to stabilize here. They do use the battle res that's available to them with Snickle Lock as he goes down. They bring him back up. And I mean, this will be a fairly long encounter. They don't have the buff of the mage, obviously, to be able to get a lot of that spell stealing happening during the Dreadlord's Guile transition phase, where the boss will be inaccessible for damage. But I mean, all eyes on them right now to take the series in a moment.
Yeah,
or to take the series
take the first game of the series.
I don't predict the future. Maybe.
And at this point, like you said, even though they don't actually have that mage cheese available to them, at this point, their strategy is much less fragile than their opponents at this point, because if the mage goes down, they lose out on all their damage.
I mean, it is possible that the entire team is lactose intolerant. That's why they opted not to have the mage cheese with them.
Understandable.
Yeah, it is understandable. You don't want those tummy aches during this kind of competition. Dentalian Axe now down to about 35% HP. We'll likely have one more Dreadlord's Guile phase. Stinging Swarm going out here. Didn't mention that. You do want to make sure that it's killed immediately. It does a ton of damage, scales quite highly with the different percentages as we see these keys go through. And it stuns you momentarily. So it's a big pain in the butt to have on the healer or a caster. It can spawn on the tank. That's definitely what you want to see. But you want to turn and burn that as quickly as possible.
Yeah, and a lot of times you're seeing everyone running into melee to make sure that the cleave damage is going to be as high as possible there. Lust coming up for Parse Culture here to be able to start finishing off the boss. At this point, 30% left, as, of course, Dark Slashers. Looks like they did clear out the rest of their trash and are starting to engage with Cortalos here.
Yeah, but I mean, it's unfortunately just too little too late, as Dentalian Axe is now reaching 18% for Parse Culture. They have that, the Bloodlust rolling, of course, 15%. They will likely beat it before the next Dreadlord's Guile phase, but I mean, this is just a really kind of sloppy run from both sides, Jack.
It was, and like I said, because Parse Culture's entire strategy wasn't formed around that one person, if that one person dies, everyone is at risk. Nobody is able to play as aggressively or as, as harsh as they would want to when lacking on the legendaries, and that just shows, big victory here for Parse Culture.
The final moments of that dungeon was nothing short of a disaster pinata.
Or a dilemma, one might say.
That's true. I would agree with you there. I would definitely agree with you there. But ultimately, that got rough. That got dark really quick. And this is one of the things that we've kind of started to say. It's happened a few times. Yes, Mage incredibly good in that dungeon, but it's not free. You still got to play well. If you make those mistakes, it can really cost you quite a bit of time. They had some moments where even after those slip-ups, it looked like Dark Slashers may be able to get back into it. And one thing that I really do want to commend them for is that all-in play. They go, okay, look, this might not work. It might not work. There's going to be a lot of cups of grass, as Sloot did call them, and ultimately sometimes you're left in a position where you may have to eat that grass. But they go for that massive pull. They try to catch up, and you have to go in for that all-in play, Jack.
Yeah, at that point, those are the desperate plays that we kind of have to talk about. Is some teams actually have been able to pull that off, and if anything, this is just going to be the one situation that you'd need to be able to do. They would potentially still be able to have a little bit of mage cheese going on, intolerance or not, if they were able to survive throughout Dantalianx's first Shadow Ball volley, getting every little bit of the trash down beforehand, not taking any of the extra damage, but so they just weren't able to pull it off, and it's just one wipe, or tank going down, dilemma going down there, just sealed their fate.
And this is not the first time we've seen a team with that kind of mage benefit fail and get beaten by a team that didn't have that kind of advantage and opportunity. And I thought about it a lot during the match. It took a lot of thinking, and did a bit of research on Google and stuff in the meantime. If the mage is dead, he's not doing any damage.
That's fascinating.
Whoa. Thank goodness. Whoever hired Ted, keep on finding us gems like this. But
expert analysis.
So one of the big things that we do have to note, though, is usually it is very hard to get the reverse sweep within the series done. Dark Slashers is a team that has found ways to regain. Do you think that they have the possibility with their particular composition, Jack, to find a reverse sweep here? What do they have to do to get that going?
I think at this point, we saw, Parse Culture going to be having the Warlock, and I think almost every single time we've seen them go to Arcway, right? So at this point, they need to make sure that they're having, the strong run into Arcway if they do go into that, but playing cleanly overall.
That's honestly my biggest concern. That's what I wanted to say. I wouldn't be shocked to see a really strong map pick coming out of Dilemma's team here, but the concern is just that Game 3 is just going to go to Arcway.
Yeah.
They're going to have the mage advantage. That's a huge hill to overcome for them. They're going to need to have just an absolute god run to compete with that Warlock extra damage from that Chaos Bringer.
We've kind of seen the same scenario play out. We already do know that it can go the other way, but ladies and gentlemen, that is just all the more reason that you need to hang tight in that chair. Don't move. Don't go anywhere, because when we return, we are going to find out who comes out on top in this winter quarters final. The team that stays here has one of the best seats to move forward. Do not go anywhere. More MDI action when we return. MDI history is starting to repeat itself as we jump back into this series, Dark Slashers versus Parse Culture. Now, this series is, like I said, starting to look a little bit similar to something that we've seen, and that was this last round. We're seeing similar compositions come out. We know that mages have their advantage in one place, Warlock's going to have their advantage in another, but there does need to be that third map. And now, Jack, we are going to see that third map. Well, it is the second map of the series, but this is kind of the third map because it doesn't necessarily play to either of those advantages.
Yeah, I believe you were saying it was going to be lower Karas that's going to be coming up. Like I said, the big concern is going to be, going forward, how they're going to be able to deal. I mean, this is kind of a natural pick coming out of Dark Slashers, where you're having that high trash density that the mage is going to be able to love to synergize very strongly with. We have still seen, Warlocks that'll still be very powerful going into this, but I think this does fit very naturally with Dark Slashers' team. It'll definitely be a concern, though, how they're going to respond, with if Parse Culture doesn't lose or doesn't win this map, and then they have the third pick coming up of, are they going to be going with Arcway to be able to take advantage of the Warlock?
And we are going to get to jump right into the action right now. Let's figure it out. Is Parse Culture going to be able to pick up that 2-0, or will we bring this the distance all the way to that dungeon number 3? The stakes are very high here. You don't want to be going to the losers bracket. You want to stay in that winning side. Who is going to get the advantage?
I don't know, Rich. That's why we're about to watch the game and see exactly what happens. Off the bat, we're going to expect both the DKs to control Undead on that Spirit. We're going to see a lot of the balcony being skipped, Jack, as we usually do, and that Spirit will either be dropped in favor of allowing the players to die while the two healers are going to start the event, or they'll just bring it over, depending on how much of the balcony trash they kill. They'll bring it over to the Opera event and kill it during that RP.
Yeah, and some of the most successful runs we've seen have been, that consistent Sky Step potions to be able to get everything in together. So the tanks, of course, wait a little bit so that the Opera event can just get started here, and the announcements can get started, the invites can go out here. Then they pull everything in together to absolutely annihilate it.
Of course, we are getting the sneak preview now from Dark Slasher's side that World of Warcraft will be becoming a side-scroller game as we see the Blood DK run across that hallway, picking up all of these mobs together. We do see the Forlorn Spirit that was controlled earlier has now been dropped in favor of getting some AoE on it, killing it with the rest of the group, and then there will be running over to the Opera event, which of course has likely been started by Edelweiss at this point. Parse Culture dealing with some of the pulls on their side as well, seeing already that Purgatory proc on Jason.
Yeah, and at this point, I'm not too concerned about going into the Opera event for the Purgatory proc, but a lot of times what teams have been doing is getting backstage down into the pit crew afterwards, and that could definitely be a scary area if you're not able to have Purgatory up and ready for it. So kind of scary, especially considering that it was a much smaller trash pool than they're going to be having going forward.
Yeah, so we do move in here now. We do know we have Beauty and the Beast here, all of the kitchen appliances, which of course include...
Just like you and me.
Yes, absolutely. You're very nice to say that, Beast. And we do see in this pool that we have all the kitchen appliances, which of course include the mop and that kobold, which is apparently a kitchen appliance. Now the players do have to choose which one of the 3 they're going to kill first, including Mrs. Cauldron. Once they down those 3, they will have access to Bablet, the stove, which is kind of the main boss of the encounter. Now, Jack, when you kill one of these mobs, though, the other 2 do heal up. So outside of trying to gain any potential single target damage, you do literally lose a lot by trying to cleave and pad those meters.
Yep, and you see, both teams here putting the focus out onto Mrs. Cauldron's, having to watch out for that spam cast soup spray here. Interesting to see that Parse Culture isn't actually taking advantage of their bloodlust here. As you're seeing Cass going down very low.
And Feral
Dog was actually killed and then rezzed very quickly here. So I am wondering if, especially because of the fact that it's so early and they haven't actually used their bloodlust, are they just not going to bother and die very quickly and reset to try to get this going again?
I mean, if they're going to reset it, they should have done it by now. They're still trying to kind of fondle through the rest of this encounter. Miss Cauldron's is only going down now. They still have 2 more to deal with, plus Coggleson, which will summon those extra forks that you want to get some cleave and splash damage onto. You don't want those getting out of hand. They do get that haste buff cast from the boss, along with the tank damage taken debuff cast as well. So Parse Culture's in for a rough time right now. That does look like they're trying to finish the encounter, but Dark Slasher's just pulling more and more ahead, understandably, with that full 5-man comp going in. Luminor is now the last one that they need to work on prior to having access to Coggleson, which is currently just invulnerable to damage until those first 3 are dead.
Yeah, but you're seeing Bablet was taken down second for Dark Slashers, while, of course, you are seeing Luminor being taken down second for Parse Culture. That's where you're seeing, just the entire room getting doused in flames for Dark Slashers, and at this point, a lot of it is going to be on what's going to be more annoying to your group. With Dark Slashers having that double range composition, you know, they have some opportunities to be able to kind of kite around Bablet, but if you're able to more easily kite it around and you want to make sure that, you know, your mage or even your hunter are going to be able to stand still and work with the smaller and the reduced positioning, as Luminor, of course, is going to be the last one to kill, it does make sense to be able to take down Bablet going after that, and now they're going into Coggleston.
Now, the one kind of silver lining of all of this issue that Parse Culture is having is that they don't, well, there's not really much of a silver lining left. I'll retract my current statement as the healer does go down. Bablet and Coggleston are still needing to be killed. Honestly, at this point, if I were them, I would just wipe it up and restart on a different route or just come back here. But, I mean, this is going to take a while to kill if they even are able to pull it off. They should be able to. I mean, they do have a Warlock, the Blood DK supporting that consumption every 45 seconds, and we do know that the leech from the Vengeance Demon, or the Havoc Demon, excuse me, can keep them afloat well, but Dark Slashers just pulling further and further ahead now. As they down the encounter, we expect to see that massive pull of the VIP backstage entrance combining with the sub or the under stage kind of trash that spawns the Firelands portals, and just having a huge fiesta here. Dilemma's particularly going to skyrocket in just a moment, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, and this is, you know, ideal pull, and what they're really doing is being able to get all these mobs down with, of course, the pit crew at the bottom here will kind of allow you to actually take advantage of those little spotlights that are going to be happening periodically from the backstage crew that will be offering a very large damage increase, so you are able to kind of get into there. While there is so much AoE damage going out, there is a ton of ground effects going out, as you're seeing Glix is just kind of trying to keep his distance as best he can. If you're able to get a couple I-beams from a distance, if you're able to actually stay in there, it can offer a lot of damage. Like you saw, you know, Rev did actually proc his Purgatory, so even if Parse Culture is able to get their way out of Coggleston here, they're going to try to do a similar pull. It's going to be so dangerous for them.
Dilemma, of course, still having the same buff from the previous dungeon carried over. No, I'm just kidding. Just doing a ton of damage. I mean, we know the kind of AoE burst damage that Fire Mages can output, and Dilemma just showing just how strong they are here, getting ready soon to pull this entire front stage area. Likely having to kite for a bit, but first we're going to have to deal with Ursher right now. Now, you have to turn around for this flashlight effect, otherwise it'll do double damage to you, and also, more importantly, disorient you. Dilemma gets hit quite hard there. I'm not sure if that's just because he didn't turn around, but he does almost die, dipping sub 10%. They do handle these first two Ushers, likely waiting for some of the cooldowns to come up before pulling that entire large stage area. Maybe they won't even pull it, but most teams usually do pull that front area.
And most of the time it will be that, you know, easier trash percentage that they're able to kind of deal with here. It does look like Parse Culture did have their full wipe at the very end of course, the Opera event here. So at this point, it looks like they are just going to be heading back and going all the way back to the Opera event here. So 6 deaths on the board, no bosses down, and they're so far behind at this point.
Yeah, this is going to be an absolute nightmare. And this isn't even one of those typical wipes that we see after you finish the Opera event and then you wipe and you go, okay, you know what, let's go left this time. We'll head over to Morose and kind of rework our strategy. They do have to get back there. They already did this. I mean, it's a nightmare for them. We'll have to keep an eye on what they do exactly, but they are getting over back to the Opera event, whilst Dark Slashers on the left side is just kind of chewing through this Usher trash and getting ready to move either to the left or right. Depends if they want to do Maiden first or Morose first. We've seen either strat come out of teams here at the tournament.
Yeah, and at this point, I think they're just pulling the Ushers in with the audience here because they were waiting to have all of their cooldowns back here. It makes sense for them to make sure they're getting everything in on top of each other, even those extra Ushers, to be able to kind of deal with all of that en masse. And at this point, like you said, you just got to make sure you're watching out for those flashlights that will be coming out and make very short work of it from that Maiden.
Those are large numbers from Dilemma coming on the board right now. 62 mil DPS, not HPS. 62 mil HP.
HPS? Where?
Yeah, I mean, that's just amazing. Oh, no, Jack. Just no. There's no point seeing that Blood DK performance. They do start moving over towards Maiden's Hall, it looks like. I expect after this pull, they'll likely pull the entire hall and line of sight around one of the pillars or corners in Maiden's room to allow a lot of those casting mobs and even just range mobs. There are some scouts there to just kind of filter into the room so that they can, once again, AoE everything down with some of that supreme damage coming in, especially from the Fire Mage.
Yeah, and Parse Culture on the other side is finally taking advantage of their Bloodlust here, getting Mrs. Cauldrons down here. They have everybody up. They have access to everybody here. So very weird, again, like I said, they didn't opt to use their Bloodlust on the pull there, and then the pull basically just went downhill from there.
It's almost like they knew they were going to wipe it.
Yeah.
It's like, let's not use our Bloodlust just in case, but I don't know. This is weird.
Very odd to see.
I just don't have anything else to say. It's just weird.
You hate to see it here. And as, of course, Dark Slashers is probably waiting on their potions, being able to get the Sky Steps so they can actually drag everything into Maiden's room here. And the same thing like you said, you want to be able to see the line of sight start coming in. You want to be able to actually get everything in together here. That way it'll be so much easier to be able to not only neutralize, and actually everybody else had to wait quite quite a bit of time to be able to get their Sky Step potions here. Always important to watch, of course, where the frontals are going to be coming out from a lot of these guards here, because they do have, like I said, those huge shield slams that are going to be coming out. That will be dealing tons of damage here. And it looks like they are opting to pull Maiden in with it, but they probably are going to end up resetting.
Yeah, it looks like they're going for a reset just to kind of... Either somebody accidentally pulled it, or looks like they're just trying to pre-position around the room once she respawns. But in just a moment here, the trash will be going down, and it's going to be Maiden in just a moment. Now, a few mechanics on this boss, of course, the main ones being the Consecrate. 2 Consecrates come down per full rotation cycle after she will cast the Mass Repentance, and the players will need to break out of that Repentance by any source of damage, usually dipping into that Consecrate, getting the dot on them, and then trying to break through her shield in order to interrupt her Holy Wrath. That will one-shot the group, of course, if not interrupted. Otherwise, Jack, just making sure that the melee spread out around the boss as to not cleave too much of that chaining damage, and the tank needs to have that Holy Bolt interrupted.
Yeah, but as you've seen here, they are kind of watching their positionings. They will have those opposite sides. Holy Bolt does drop Malene down 50%, and while it's not gigantic damage to the first target it hits, if it ever actually splits off onto the second target, it will basically one-shot them, so it's very important to make sure you're able to spread out there and also have some clear lines as to where everyone's going to run out those consecrations that are going out. You're seeing Parse Culture finally taking down the Opera event here, and now they're going to be able to get themselves set up to be able to actually get some trash going on.
Apparently they didn't know that they could actually just unplug Coggleston from the wall and finish the encounter immediately. Nonetheless, they try to go through the hard direction, and we'll see them a bit later as we get into the full screen here for Maiden of Virtue and Dark Slashes right now, dealing well with all the mechanics so far. They haven't had they're getting it right now. So here's the Mass Repentance. You see all the players dip into that Consecration on the ground. We should have the breakout in just a moment, and they will have to chew through this shield. Shouldn't be too tough to do in this fortified setting, and want to wait until, okay, maybe they don't, but usually you want to wait until the last second to get that Holy Wrath interrupt, because it just delays all of her phases and all the mechanics that she puts out. You get free damage uptime.
You know, it might have just been an Arcane Torrent here, so thankfully, you know, in the future that won't be a problem for them to worry about. But like you said, they will have the Mass Repentance going out.
Yikes.
Right immediately afterwards. She will have a very quick cast of the Holy Bulwark that will put the big shield on her, and then she will have that mass AoE effect to be able to wipe out the entire party there. So having that cast sequence is always very important, you know, to make sure that you're able to have the damage to be able to break yourself out of it, and at that point it will just be all on burning the shield down, being able to push the face.
Yeah, I mean, the real dream here is to try and kill her before she gets her second shield. It's just such a long sequence when she gets that shield, and you have to deal with the entire Mass Repentance again. So she's starting to hit her, well, actually we do see the turtle come up from Malene there. Does well to not have to get back into that Consecrate and just start dishing out damage right away. Unfortunately, they don't beat that second phase, but with how far ahead they are, might as well play it safe and not too risky. There's just no point throwing this match right now for them.
And at this point, they have 0 deaths on the board. This has been, you know, their comfort pick. This is, you know, their counter pick here. And it's also important to note that, you know, they are able to make sure they're going through this confidently and being able to actually get some good times going on here, because we've seen this. I mean, it also kind of looks a lot like their Nels Lair, where they were setting up extremely strong times, very strong pulls on their counter picks here. And while they did drop their first map here, this is what you want to be able to have out of your counter picks, especially because, you know, they actually haven't lost any series yet. You know, so if they're going into, say, a lower bracket, they'd still be able to have this option as a strong counter pick.
Right, you are, Jack. We're going to see a big pull coming out here as the speed pod comes, or excuse me, the Sky Step potion comes up from the tank. Rev pulling all of Morosa's hallway. Now, a lot of these guests are going to melt immediately, but there are 3. Did he pull 3 or just 2 of them? Looks like there's only 2 Arcane Wardens here, these blueberries that we often call them. You want to make sure that those circles don't explode on the players. They don't deal too much damage. It's really the swirlies they put on the ground that are particularly dangerous. So there we see the last Warden being picked up. You really wish somebody would have tagged it for him so that they could get the effective cleave on it too. Now they're going to waste a few precious seconds of damage having to deal with that high health Warden that came in whilst the other ones were at 30%.
Yeah, and contrary to popular belief, those swirlies on the ground do not cover you in blueberry at all. Just aching amounts of damage here as they're taking down, like you mentioned, you know, that last Warden. And it really does show whenever you're able to get everything in together how much more even that trash percentage will be. But at this point, he's able to kind of pull a couple of the extra mobs here, take out some of the extra guests, and continue kind of getting that cleave damage going out here. We've seen some extremely risky pulls where all of those Wardens start going out, and as long as you're able to dodge everything on the ground, the rest of the damage can be minimal, but it's so easy to kind of get lost, especially when you're trying to navigate yourself around these tables, which can really slow you down.
So Dark Slashers, we're seeing that Control Undead come on that Skeletal Waiter coming in, and it looks like they're actually going to be heading over to Adamant first, or at least doing a larger pull. No, they're just getting some extra trash in this room, but it looks like they're already kind of rearing up to go over to that stable area and get ready for everyone's favorite horse rider boss, Adamant.
Yeah, at this point, you know, Also waiting for their cooldowns, being able to take down some of the more easy trash to be able to deal with here. We've seen some extremely large pulls going into Adamant's room because, of course, if you do end up pulling Adamant, you pull all the surrounding trash in with it. We've seen very mixed results going into that. It will be interesting to see because this is their safety pick. We've seen incredibly aggressive pulls out of them from Nell Slayer, pulling everything up to Ularog. So while they're getting the rest of this down, looks like they're going to be going on back to Morose once they actually have all their cooldowns available here. It will be interesting to see if they go on to Adamant, if they're going to end up pulling huge parts of the room or even all of it.
It looks like they're getting back into Morose's room right now. They do pick up a couple of traps now. Morose and his dinner guests are buffed for every dinner guest within range, so oftentimes you will see teams, crowd control. Some of them we do see one going up on Druger there, and probably another one coming up in a moment on Darius. Those are the two that throw out one throws out a whirlwind weapon and the other just whirlwind, so it really kind of a pain in the butt for the melee. Millstripe's in there too. You want to make sure you're interrupting her mana drain, especially when it comes up. The most dangerous though probably being Ference. Ference does have that huge holy frontal. We see that going down on the side there. You can actually disrupt it by moving him with a grip or a pun. Actually, I think it's just is it a grip too? I know a pun works. A grip or pun, yeah. So anything that will displace him will work in terms of interrupting that, but I mean, they just pop their Bloodlust and absolutely chew through those two mobs.
And at that point, that's really what you want to be able to see, is be able to get these down as rapidly as possible so you don't have to actually end up dealing with it. You're going to be having those the whirlwinds that are going to be, the axes that are getting thrown out over the course of the room, which usually aren't going to be too difficult as long, of course, as you're seeing, Edelweiss and Dilemma keeping their distance there, making sure they're able to kind of watch out for it here. Always important to note is the Garrote's constantly going out. The first one will always end up going to the healer first, and then it'll start going around the room onto the rest of the targets going out here. Very important to watch out for all those battle axes that they are just starting to close in on the entire group here. But at this point, they're able to kind of keep on cleaving damage onto, Darius a little bit for resources if need be, but at this point, they're just tunneling Morose.
And Darius is just trying to ask the group a question right now, but they're doing well to move away from those whirlwinds. In the meantime, Morose, our skeletal host, really has a bone to pick with the rest of the group for interrupting his dinner party right now. One of the mobs, I believe it's Druger, still remains on top of the stage. They're likely just going to leave him CC the rest of it. One of the advantages that bringing a hunter to this encounter has, they don't get broken out of that hunter trap when Morose forcibly breaks the rest of the CC out on top of his stage. So a bit of a freebie for them in that sense. Morose going down now almost as fast as Darius. At this point, it's probably just the passive cleave going on Darius with all the ignite spread and of course the cleave from the melee as well. But Morose was likely going to die here before Darius does.
One would always hope. At 2% here onto Morose for Dark Slashers, taking him down. And again, 0 deaths so far as we've been playing extremely cleanly. 6 deaths here for Parse Culture going forward into it. They do have Morose down and are well positioned to start working on it.
It looks like it's actually 8 now, unfortunately. So they're just kind of racking those up. We don't know what's happening, but likely it's not good at the moment. They're having some struggles with this dungeon. Now we do know what's happening. They do have a couple deaths here. We see that they have 0 battle reses on the screen, which is what their 7th and 8th deaths were. They likely use those 2 battle reses to res the members, have a full 5 strengths, while Maiden of Virtue is sub 20% on them. Dark Slashers here, we'll have to see. It looks like they're starting with a more modest pull, but we do see some teams run in and pull Adamant right away, which will aggro the entire stable area, and then you kind of run out, funneling all the mobs in line of sighting them and just killing them with huge damage as they come in. So we'll see if they're going to try to pull off that kind of pull here.
Yeah, and one of the things is because we are in this fortified setting, you really need to make sure you have all of your cooldowns available to you when you're going through this. So, making sure that even if they are going to be doing a modest pull here, many times I would have liked to actually have them go through the smiths first, because they usually are a lot more painful to deal with than any of the horses here. But we'll see. I mean, at this point, they really can just take it piecemeal. They really can just take it slow and not have to worry about going for these, world best or realm best times.
So they're doing well spread out here, of course, with that AoE splash from those circles that come down from the mobs in this area. There's about 4 or 5 more packs outside what they're pulling here. The reason they're dealing with these journeymen on the side first is they're particularly dangerous. They have some abilities that just do a ton of AoE damage to the group. So if you're to pull it with everything, which is why you see a lot of teams fail with this pull, there's just sometimes way too much damage, even for the healers popping CDs to just deal with, especially if people aren't spreading properly. We might see a big pull coming up after this pack, but also we've seen some teams, Jack, do a full pull on top of the boss and just pop everything. They don't have Bloodlust available though, so I'm not sure if that's something they'll want to be trying.
At this point, when they have 2 battle reses available, they haven't had any deaths, it does look like they're posturing themselves to actually start going after it here. So it definitely will offer, that additional cleave, and especially when you're going to have, Dilemma Dilemma putting up such huge numbers on a lot of these mass trash pulls, they've taken care of some of the most lethal trash going into it, so they should be well suited to be able to deal with the rest of this.
And I mean, here it is, they're saddling up and pulling everything in this entire area. The AoE grip's going to come pinpoint right on top of Adam and getting as much damage in as they can, wanting to make sure to get rid of all that trash before they enter the transition phase on Adam in the second phase here.
And they did it.
And they did it, so all the trash goes down, but so does Edelweiss. Luckily, they have that res for her. She does come up right away, and we are now in that and goes down right away again as she gets trampled by that horse coming up. Fortunately, they have that second battle res, as we discussed. Team is back at full strength now. They're getting as much damage as they can on Adam to try and prevent him from going down, rather mounting up for another phase once Midnight reaches that 100%, but I don't think they're going to be anywhere close to that threshold.
Yeah, we've seen Vampblood and, of course, Icebound Fortitude going out there for Rev to be able to deal with that shared suffering, that huge damage that's going to be going out onto the entire group. Glix, of course, doing well to kind of step out of there to be able to dodge past it. Then, as you're seeing here, everyone's kind of collapsing on top of Midnight here because you do have to watch out for the horses that can spawn there, but you also have to watch out by standing in the melee attacks that the boss can just randomly do on anybody standing nearby. So Glix getting the one shot there. It's so scary to be able to stand by, and they almost have another battle res left available to them, but at this point, you know, they are quite a bit ahead of their opponents here, so at this point, they just need to make sure they live, stay, and play cleanly.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it would have been nice to have one of those battle reses available right now, but just didn't work out for them. Want to make sure you dodge these spectral walls. They will do a ton of damage, likely a one-shot on you, which is why you're seeing the range players stack with the boss and the melee as well. That's because those walls spawn anywhere around, I believe, a 30-yard radius around the boss, so they can't spawn right on top of you if you're unlucky enough, if you're standing at a distance. So they opt to just stay in melee, play it safe, and then get ready to burn the boss once it comes out, once it dismounts off of Midnight again, and you can re-enable that second phase.
Yeah, and the rest of the team does do well to actually outrange, of course, the boss's stomps here. The boss's stomps will, of course, interrupt you and just deal a huge amount of damage here. So they are standing way out in the corner there at max range to make sure that they're avoiding those as best as they possibly can here. At this point, they just need to make sure that they're able to deal with probably one more shared suffering there to be able to watch out for. And a huge pull here coming out of Parse Culture. And this is kind of the desperate pulls that we've really able to see. So many volcanics coming out of the ground here as they're pulling everything in together. This is the pull they need to be able to actually get back into the game here. But they actually didn't even use battle res, and you're seeing actually just a full team wipe here as everyone just gets obliterated.
I mean, you know, they had to. We talked about this earlier. You kind of have to have these YOLO or whatever the kids say these days pulls, and it just didn't work out for them. And the tank can stay alive for a while through this kind of damage, but eventually they will fall too. And I mean, just to no avail, the tank can stay alive for really no reason at this point. It looks like Dark Slashers will easily be able to take this match as Adaman has been downed and Midnight has that 100% increased damage taken and dealt debuff or buff active on them, and they're just going to clean up the series and clean up the game rather and tie the series at one apiece, Rich.
It's lights out for Midnight, and like you said, Salute, you're right. The kids, they still do say YOLO, YOLO indeed, but the thing is there is only going to be one map left in this series that is going to decide who does advance in the upper portion of the bracket, but because we are already hanging out in that winner's portion of the bracket, neither of these teams have lost yet. Loser of this does not get eliminated, but instead will drop down to the lower portion of the bracket. But like we said, one map left. Do you think we're going to the Arcway?
Yes.
It seems back to you. Yeah.
It seems likely. Yeah.
Commercial. Yeah. No. At the end of the day, though, in all seriousness, it does seem like that's going to be the pick. This is pretty much the series that we just saw in this same round, and it seems to be how it has been playing out. Basically, having that mage and that warlock swinging between the two. Why has Karazhan been that other map pick, though, Salute?
I mean, there's a few reasons, right? There could be a few reasons. It's pretty friendly for just a ton of cleave that obviously Dilemma had for the team. He delivered huge amounts of damage. It's a dungeon that, I mean, has of course been out for a while. They're used to just dealing with the mechanics there, and it's also a dungeon that of course you don't want to wipe, but you know there are strategies that you can adjust to on the fly if that were to happen. Especially if you wipe, we mentioned after the opera, you know, oh, let's release and go to the left, let's go to Morose instead. So there's lots of different strats that you can really kind of pull to try and get advantage. I mean, if we saw that pull work out for them at the end with everything on top of Adaman, they maybe probably wouldn't have won because they still had such a huge death difference, but it would have pulled them substantially closer. So there are some pretty big plays you can make in that dungeon.
Yeah, and especially it kind of was a mirror game, really, where the game one with Black Rock Hold, where you're seeing, you know, the team making Dark Slashers making such a desperate play to be able to kind of get back into it here. And then you're also seeing going into lower where they say, we're going to pull everything in with the boss to see if we can get back into this. So a lot of this is assumption of saying, oh, they have a warlock, so they're probably possibility to go Arcway here. Even if they do end up going down that route, we haven't seen just overall cleanliness in these polls out of both teams on such a huge, consistent basis here. So just like, it's not a guaranteed win for the Mage team going into Blackroot Cold, I don't see it being a guaranteed win for Parse Culture going into Arcway here.
It's probably even less of a guarantee, and we've already seen Mages lose in that advantage that they had, but we're going to see after this. Are we going to the Arcway? Are we going somewhere else? I don't know. We're finding out after this. Parse Culture against the Dark Slashers. Who is going to get to stay in the winners portion of the bracket for another day, and who is going to fall into losers? We find out after this quick break. History tends to repeat itself. We can learn from the past, and from that past, we assume that we are going to Arcway. But you're wrong. We're actually going to Cathedral of Eternal Night. You didn't see this timeline coming, and we are ready to embark down this crazy happenstance. My name is Rich. I'm going to be your host. I'm joined by Jack and Sloot. And guys, why on earth do you think we're going to the Cathedral of Eternal Night, even though we keep talking about this advantage that Warlocks do?
I don't know what you guys are talking about. I told you they're not going to go to Arcway the entire time.
Thanks, Ted.
This is a dungeon that over time has become much less scary. I mean, when it first came out, it was an absolute nightmare. But it's not too bad now. There's a lot of, it just comes down to the same thing. There's a lot of skips you could do, a lot of the balcony trash at the start. Why though? I mean, why not take that Warlock advantage in Archway? I don't know. To be honest, it's just, I guess they're just better versed in this dungeon. They're more comfortable with it. They're not used to a center strat on Archway, whatever it could be.
It's funny because this used to have the Warlock advantage. You know, last MDI, it did. Maybe this just happens to be one of those dungeons that they are much more practiced on. Do you think that there is any way, Jack, that they can kind of carve their own little niche on this dungeon, do it slightly differently, or do you think it is mostly just going to be a case of seeing polish?
I think a lot of it will kind of come down to polish here. We've seen, especially out of, I believe it was the European teams who were actually just having that mass jump. Actually, no, it was the APAC teams, where they were kind of all just clearing out the mini-boss, clearing out a lot of the additional trash there, everybody jumping off the ledge, and then having, of course, the rest of Druid just res everybody up into Agronox's room there. And I think that's one of the things that really set the tone as people were seeing that going forward. A lot of people already knew about the strategy, and if you were able to get all the impacts after Thrashbite's room in together, get all of that annihilated before it actually got into the portal there, it just makes up all kinds of trash, and it makes it so much easier to go throughout the rest of the instance.
How you deal with those impacts will definitely have a large impact in this dungeon, but we're ready to get right into it. Darkness will fall as we go into the Cathedral of Eternal Night, the dungeon that we did not expect at all, unless you were Sloot, because Ted, you're a genius.
What can I say, Rich? I appreciate that, Professor. So, Jack, like, there's a trade boss here.
Look at that.
Oh, man.
Yikes.
So we're going to have, it's actually going to be interesting to see, because there's just, we usually discuss, oh, well, this is what teams do right off the bat, or one of these two options. We've actually seen a slew of different skips or types of skips or time when they end up doing the skips in this first boss area. But what is for sure is that if you screw any of this up, it's bad, of course, for starters, but your only checkpoint right now with this huge amount of trash leading up to the first boss is just releasing at the start of the dungeon.
Yeah, and when you do have that slew of course, just big areas you have to watch out for, you are seeing, of course, the bloodlust going off. When you're in that fortified scenario, being able to deal with the mini-boss in Duelzac is so important to be able to neutralize quickly here. You do have to deal with the Sanguine there, so there's a little bit of a delay between actually pulling Duelzac and getting everything else in with it. And at this point, Dark Slasher is just making sure they're able to kind of push Duelzac down the room as they're clearing out all the extra trash, and able to kind of hold him as close as possible here towards the walls. That way, any of the shadow waves there are only going to be going out towards there and not towards just everybody all at once.
And of course, we are back to Sanguini Panini right now, so you want to make sure to kind of backpedal and back it on up like a U-Haul truck. Make sure you get out of that Sanguine area, otherwise the bosses and the mobs will heal for, I believe, 3 or 5% per second, something like that. And with this mini-boss Duelzac right now, he does kind of force cast that frontal wave, so it'd be a really bad combination to kill a mob under him as he's doing that and have some of that huge health pool restored.
Yeah, and at this point, because, like you said, it is that percentage, they're making sure they're just having very strong movement going out throughout the rest of this instance. And a lot of time, I believe Parse Culture had already taken care of Duelzac here, so they had a much stronger focus on that single target damage to be able to deal with it. And just now, Dark Slashers is clearing it out and being able to get the rest of the trash. And I believe they're just trying to get Edelweiss out of combat, really.
Yeah, I mean, that kill felt like it took forever on Duelzac for Dark Slashers. Both teams now at 13% apiece, no problem. As we see that Skystep come out of Rev, goes up, grabs some of the trash with the 2 bats sitting there. Aggro's the Bat Rider as well, does need to be interrupted. There is a fear cast from this Rider that players have to pay attention to, getting as much trash together as possible as Parse Culture. Oh, they actually didn't even pull, you lied to me.
I did, indeed.
They didn't even pull Duelzac, but they do let him aimlessly by himself run down the hallway, not even aggro them. Really, I mean, they're just kind of
What a silly boss.
What a silly boss. He just runs away. They don't even deal with it. Clever by them. And they just let him run by and resume along their day pulling the rest of the trash.
But it does come with a little bit of a timer with it, because I believe he does just completely circle all the way around. So they have a little bit of time to be able to kind of get past that. So it looks like they might just be pulling into this little cubby here, deal with all the trash, let Duelzac actually run by, and continue doing all of their trash with these little alcoves to be able to hide from him.
And this is where we find out that Duelzac really was an Olympian at track and field, as he tends to kind of run circles around this balcony here. We'll say, I mean, Parse Culture, this is their map pick. I'm sure they practice this. They know the timings. They know exactly what's going to happen. Pretty unconventional. We usually don't see this from the teams. We also usually don't see the teams, at least in this tournament, spending so much time on this first balcony. A lot of the time you see that one pull come in, and then Jack, as you alluded to, the healer's already upstairs, rezzing on the top balcony, or we see just, an invis pod coming in at latest, at least at this point, from where Dark Slashers is now for the rest of the hallway. So they're really both opting to chew through a lot of this trash, but we do see finally that stealth come in on Parse Culture's side from Feral Dog running all the way up the stairs as the rest of the team uses their invis pods and start heading up as well.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see, of course, the skips that they're going to start working on their way through here. And like I said, a lot of times people really try to skip through as much as possible to be able to kind of get around here. So I'm very interested in seeing, how they're going to be able to deal with not only the impacts, because those imps are, of course, having to deal with the explosives there. We've seen teams be able to pull it off, but it is so dangerous because of just the density, the quantity of mobs that you do have there, spawning all kinds of explosives at once there. So it looks like, maybe they will not end up actually going through there. But at this point, Dark Slash is just waiting to get the mass res up, that are going to be skipping themselves just around a lot of the more lethal trash, the more annoying trash to deal with here as they're working on their way towards Agronox's room.
We do have a death come in as well for Parse Culture with this pull. I mean, they pulled those 3 mobs that are kind of sitting halfway up the stairwell, which are particularly dangerous. They do have, of course, that frontal slash, just a lot of AoE damage going down, dispels that need to be done as well, and they pulled it all the way upstairs to some of the trash, combining it with the Agronox area. So we do see that death go down. Battle Res has been used as a result, but Dark Slasher still has their available as they only deal with that 3-pack solo.
Yeah, and this is one of the more time-consuming packs of trash you have to deal with, is when you're going up those stairs, you do have to kind of stop, wait, deal with this trash pack, because fighting, especially the Blade Lords, when they have the Fell Slash going out on top of the stairs, can just be an absolute nightmare here. So here's where you're going to see Parse Culture really making up for a lot of that lost time here. You're able to see Feral Dog just going into bear form, get those quick Moonfires out to be able to start dealing with a lot of the explosive orbs that are going to be spawning here, getting everything in, grouped up together, being able to actually keep those interrupts coming in, of course, for the tree boss with the ground pound.
Now some of this trash is particularly dangerous with these lashers as well. They do tend to kind of spawn some of the vines, and that snap vines grabbing players, pulling them in slowly and doing a pretty heavy dot in the meantime, but they can run out of range and break that bond between the flowers. Parse Culture opting to respect the danger of this trash, only pulling 2 of the packs. There are another 2 on the opposite side of this kind of little garden well area before they're able to pull Agronox.
Yep. So at this point, Dark Slashers are making sure they're kind of getting everything in together. Very good grips to be able to get, of course, the Succubus kind of away from the rest of the group here. There was quite a bit of healing going off onto the botanist there, but you are seeing another death on the side of Parse Culture on Kaz there. You need to make sure that, at this point, they don't have any other battle reses left available to them, so you kind of have to just stay down, because they did use the Invis to kind of skip past a lot of that trash here. And like you mentioned earlier, it's such a pain when your first reset, you have to make sure you're getting Agronox down. And whenever you're trying to skip past all this other trash, it really puts you in this kind of all-in situation.
Parse Culture looking to kill some more of this flower trash to really chlorophyll up the rest of their trash meter right now. They are opting to hang on to that, but we see the perk prog over from Jason. Dips quite low right now, doesn't die, fortunately, but a couple of them really low. I mean, a wipe here would be absolutely devastating for Parse Culture. They managed to stabilize, hopefully finish off the rest of this pack while babysitting those fell explosives. Dark Slasher is looking in a prime position to embark on their journey to pull Agronox in just a moment.
The journey has begun here for Dark Slashers. Equal percentage in terms of trash and deaths here, but the fact that they have to take care of this one last flower on the side of Parse Culture just consumes so much time. And we've seen it a lot of times in boss fights, especially tyrannical ones, where they've kind of passed a lot of the lethal mechanics and they can still complete the boss, a man down. But when you're actually having to take so much longer, losing out on 1 DPS, it's such a pain to be able to deal with. And you're seeing it right now in the Fortified instance when they have to deal with this trash and then wait to be able to actually get the res out onto Cass.
Jack, did you just say lethal mechanics on this tree boss? My God, that was excellent. I commend you, good sir. Now for Agronox, we do have 2 waves of flowers that spawn. Some of those lashers that, of course, do fixate 1 player each. If they reach you, they will explode for a substantial amount of damage. Players will oftentimes just slow them, AoE grip them, whatever. Nothing too much to deal with. We do have the increasing damage aura on the group. We see 2 stacks of that mushroom, now 3 stacks on the tank. Will also get pumped up, but probably the most dangerous part of this fight is really that succulent lasher that just spawned under the boss. It actually melees for a substantial amount more damage than the boss does, and it kind of drops some spooge on the ground, if you will, that you want to avoid. Players often kind of grip it, stun it, chain CC it, however they will, to make sure they get rid of it as quickly as possible.
I really don't like the positioning out of Dark Slashers right here to deal with Agronox. When you have to deal with all of those lashers going out right here, it really makes it so much more difficult to deal with the explosive orbs that do spawn on the entire opposite side of the room here. You are seeing Parse Culture playing a lot closer against that flower bed, but they are already having one of their DPS down here, so it's going to be even harder when they don't actually have any battle reses, and they're about halfway through the boss fight.
Yeah, they used their battle res earlier on just sloppiness on trash. They had another death on trash after that. They had to 4-man the rest of that flower, which took ages, and now they have a 52, remaining 60% actually when this happened on the boss. Once again, with 4, they can't fully wipe unless they put a pylon down. but also probably more time than just four-manning the rest of the boss. So this is Parse Culture's pick, and it's looking, unfortunately, pretty sloppy for them. They should be able to clean up this, hopefully we'll be able to clean up this boss, we'll see. But Dark Slasher's looking in a much better position right now as they're reaching that 15% mark on Agronox.
Yeah, and even though, I wasn't too fond of their positioning there, and there was a lot of weird times where Dilemma, the Fire Mage, was actually helping out with the explosive orbs, they did very well to be able to deal with all of those lashers and the explosives that were spawning from it. So it is a more odd positioning overall, but it really worked so well here. And Edelweiss did an excellent job to be able to, I was going to say to be able to keep everybody alive, but they are dealing with that succulent lasher that kind of delayed a little bit before it despawned.
Now, fortunately for them, by killing the boss, they did obtain the checkpoint here, so anybody who dies can actually just release back in this room, does not get sent all the way back to the front of the dungeon. Parse Culture still doing well to stay alive with that four-man comp as they chew through the rest of the boss. They now as well reaching that 15% mark on Agronox. But Jack, now we're starting to move up to that trash that you said was particularly dangerous for Dark Slashers as we get into Thrashbite, brother of Smash Spite's room, with a lot of these kind of bookcasters and the imps.
Yep, and at this point, dealing with all these while having to watch out for the explosives is extremely important here because it does have the potential of slowing down groups, especially if they don't actually have those optimal compositions to really run with it. So a lot of times you're looking towards, the healer, you're looking towards the tank to be able to help deal with a lot of these explosive orbs. But when you have the extra part of Sanguine going out there, when you have the tank responsible for repositioning all the ads to keep them out of the Sanguine and having them working on dealing with a lot of the explosive orbs, it's so much to kind of deal with and so much to balance when the very positioning that you're trying to go after is controlling the other mobs there.
Certainly don't want those imps to stay in that Crostini for too long. We do see some nice Chaos Novas coming out of Glick as he runs over and stuns those Arcane Tomes that are casting the Arcane mobs if they were to finish their cast. Really well done by them. If you do stun them, it stops their cast and the books are essentially useless, as they are in real life according to you, Jack. So you make sure you get rid of all of them. Now, Rev does move into the middle of the room, pulls a double pack here, opts not to pull the 2 Scavengers or the 5 imps on the far side, just dealing with kind of taking it a bit slow. We have seen some really risky pulls from some of the teams in past weeks, pulling the entirety of this room and waiting for Gazerax solo after.
Yeah, at this point, while books are extremely important, which is why Thrashbite must be eliminated here, it is very important, like you mentioned, to make sure you're watching out for a lot of this positioning here. And because it is Sanguine, you do have, that extra complication of the positioning. We've seen some teams, for example, pulling in a lot of the imps into that mini-boss, into another eyeball boss, which I hear is a very, very, very big favorite for you, Ted. But at this point, not being able to have too much in the way of manipulating the ads. They're probably just going to have Typhoon and maybe Mass Grip to be able to move them out before they die, to make sure they're not going to be on anything particular. It just kind of makes sense to kind of pull all the other trash first before they do engage with this mini boss.
Now they should pull Gazerax kind of out of the room as they're slowly starting to here, but I would pull it out just a bit more to be safe. You don't want that Sanguini spawning on the ground because although it's not right where Thrashbite is going to spawn, he can charge one of the bookcases, as we do know later, and you don't want him charging right into or anywhere near one of the Sanguine, as it will heal the boss, and having a few % heal on the boss can be particularly devastating. But they are starting to pull it just a bit to the side. Hopefully that won't be an issue for them. Parse Culture dealing on the right side of the screen, of course, with their first impact leading up to this room in the first place. So a fair bit behind for them, plus they have that 1 extra death on the board compared to Dark Slashers 3.
Yeah, and at this point, Dark Slashers does have that sizable lead at clearing almost all of this room here. They do need to really watch out for, of course, this focused destruction that is going out. It does deal very, very large amounts of damage here. And the Trank was already used on the side of Edelweiss here. So you are seeing Malign going down. I am very surprised about the positioning, though, because Malign should be able to actually max range this going past that 40-yard mark, be able, by being in Marksman Spec, to be able to actually stand away from that and not get hit and take any kind of damage at all. So I'm not sure if it's just a miscommunication in terms of where the boss or the mini-boss was positioned, or just laziness maybe on his part.
Rather explosive situation happening on Parse Culture's side, as some of those explosives do go on and finish off the unfortunate Windwalker Monk yet again. They do release and come all the way back to Agronox's room. They'll release from there. Unfortunately, didn't get one of the stun on the tomes, as we see on the right side of the screen. Things are starting to get just a bit out of hand for Parse Culture's side. The Warlock does go down as well. They're kind of desperately trying to get out of the room. They have 3 of those Arcane Anomalies and Gazerac pulled on the side. Looking pretty grim for them. Jason does go down, the Blood DK. Probably going to be a full team wipe there. A bit overzealous in that room, but Thrashbite starting over on Dark Slasher's side, and that Bloodlust is popped too.
And it's so scary for Parse Culture, really, because even though they've wiped to those Arcane Anomalies, it still takes a long time before they die. So they have to wait to actually get the res and start waiting for them to despawn and actually have the Sanguine puddles. While Dark Slasher is already halfway through, of course, Thrashbite.
Would you say that they're halfway there? So with Thrash, don't even start with me, Jack. With Thrashbite now, we see this arrow come up, and he'll actually charge into the Sanguine. I really hope he doesn't get any percent. Edelweiss just, you know, we talked about you kind of have that trick where you can go into the bookcase, and the hitbox of the boss will oftentimes hit the bookcase prior to hitting the player, which will of course one-shot you if it hits you first, but didn't work out so well there for Edelweiss. She does go down. They use the Battle Res immediately to get her up. Deal with those 2 books as Thrashbite is illiterate, can't read. Want to make sure he's having a good time. Those Arcane Tomes are immediately killed, and they book it back to the middle of the room and make sure they're not hanging around the outsides as not to be cloaked by this whirling weapon.
Yeah, and 5% here, you know, Thrashbite regaining his weapon just in time to
die.
Very interested in seeing how they're going to be going through this pull. It does look like because the group is standing off into the side, they are just going to have the line of sight going out here. They will let the rest of those impacts, of course, just go forward here. It does look like they missed out on some of the scavenger packs, but also they missed out on a lot of the explosives that I was kind of expecting when those mobs are engaged. You'd think that the second they do end up spawning, you would start seeing a lot of explosive orbs, but it has been extremely light for them. I don't think I've seen any.
Yeah, I mean, a bit of RNG involved. We're not used to seeing that, of course, oftentimes, but there's a bit of RNG involved with when and how many of those orbs spawn. In this case, though, you already saw them kind of pre-line of sighting around the corner, so even if you had 10 of them spawn on the other side of the room, nothing too dangerous for them. Opt not to deal with the rather impressive pull that Rich hinted to earlier, blocking the imps. They don't have access to a lot of CC. We see usually, you know, Ring of Peace coming down. They, of course, have the Chaos Nova and some slows from the 2 of them. They have, well, actually, they have the Chaos Nova.
They have Fire Strike.
They have Binding.
Flame Strike and Binding.
Yeah, and Binding. So they, I mean, they have a fair bit, but oftentimes the king and the MVP there is really that Ring of Peace holding the mobs there, plus the AoE grip holding the mobs there for 8 seconds. Either way, they opt not to deal with it and deal with the spider trash upstairs. Parse Culture working on Thrashbite now, having freshly pulled him at 92%.
And it's interesting at this point, you know, they are really just playing Dark Slashers this instance just as if they were going to chest it at home, if they were going to be playing this regular key. We're not seeing any incredibly fancy strategies out of them, which granted really makes sense because this is not their pick, but the scary thing is with Parse Culture is they're falling behind. They've had these wipes, they've had these simple mistakes going on all too often where they're not able to kind of deal with those books, and it does seem like they weren't quite as well prepared as Dark Slashers was for this instance. I mean, Dilemma here is having just a field day when they had those the books coming out that could have spawned the Arcane Anomalies, being able to get the quick Dragon's Breath to be able to interrupt them. They just completely shut those down, whereas on the other side you're seeing Parse Culture having to deal with it and getting another death here and going into Thrashbite.
And they don't have that battle res available either, so just another huge time sink. They'll be able to likely kill this boss. They have more than enough bookcases left, but it's going to take them a while. Only 4 of them alive. Dark Slashers now working on Nalasha, particularly dangerous mini-boss style mob. We see huge damage coming in from Moline right now. Actually pulls aggro on one of the spiders coming down by accident. Those do apply a rather potent and smelly, might I add, dot on the tank. Now, you can dispel, as we see, of course, Edelweiss doing there, you can dispel them on the tank occasionally, but that does have an 8-second CD.
Yeah, and it was actually quite scary because Edelweiss immediately dispelled Moline, so the tank in Rev actually got up to about 5 stacks, almost 6 stacks very rapidly.
Caps out at 5.
Oh, it does cap it out. Sorry, okay. So
it gets rough at 5.
Yeah, so I mean, he was just yo-yoing really at that point, and as Edelweiss just trying to get that dispel off onto him. So it was just so scary. You are seeing Rev just dipping down very low, playing with fire really as he's just kind of pooling up a huge reserve of runic power to be able to get himself topped off quickly.
And funny you say that, do have a Fire Mage. Nalasha does go down, the ever so dangerous Spider Queen, as they spin around and get ready to leave this room, heading up the stairwell to the last 2 bosses. There's only a small bit of trash that you'll see them have to complete a bit later. Now, they're at 91%. There's only 4 Fellbats that remain after the 3rd boss, Domitrax, if I'm not mistaken, that definitely don't give 9% trash.
They definitely do not.
So at this point, they either realize it and say, hey, let's deal with the bosses, let's finish Mephistroth off, and then we'll go back into the dungeon and hunt the rest of the trash that we need. Or maybe they haven't realized it, and then we'll see exactly how it'll turn out.
Yeah, and I'm trying to think of what's going to be the most optimal path for them to kind of run over towards, because at this point they have cleared out all of the imps through Thrashbite's
and the spiders,
and before Thrashbite's room. I don't believe they actually pulled the 2nd set of spiders right above Thrashbite's room.
Okay.
So I think that might actually be where they're going to go to get that additional percent.
That could be their saving grace, but all eyes on Domitrax right now, the 3rd boss of the dungeon. Spawns portals at 90% and 50%. The ones that he spawns at 90%, as we'll see in just a moment here, aren't as dangerous. You do want to kill those portal guardians before they finish their cast, else they will summon a particularly evil, it's not really a Dreadlord, it's kind of like a Fire Lord. But
it's like a Fel Lieutenant.
Yeah, Fel Lieutenant. So you want to make sure to kill those off quickly, but the imps that they spawn, although seemingly not dangerous, they actually get Fel Bolts off for about 4 to 5 mil. So you want to make sure they're interrupted and that they're meleeing the tank, no one else. Do a fair bit of damage considering how puny they are in size. Domitrax casting his chaotic energy at 100 at 100 energy. At 100 energy, yes. Players doing well to hide in that middle shield and getting ready for that 50% mark with the second set of portals.
Yeah, and right now they're making sure they're having that strong positioning right next to, of course, the Aegis there, so that when the chaotic energy does go out, actually interesting, I think they are going to have a perfect, there it is, actually. They are forcing the transition early. They're not going to be waiting for the chaotic energy. And like you said, this is usually something that's not as common that they're going to be doing here, because right in the middle, of course, of this phase, you're having the chaotic energy going off. So Rev is actually just sitting in there, popping defensives to make sure that none of those ads are coming near. And you're also seeing the binding shot going down by Malign to make sure that if any of the Shavara do come out, that they will be staying far away here. Edelweiss going down again. The last battle res being utilized. They have probably about a minute before the next one will be back available to them. But at this point, they did very well to make sure that they're getting all of the Shavara tightly packed in together and annihilated.
Yeah, the Shavara do an AoE Shadow Whirl that punt players around them away, so you don't want one of those coming into the shield as the players are trying to hide from that chaotic energy. They do well there. Rev, of course, stays on the outside to maintain that aggro. Blood DKs do well with that spike magic damage, popping that Vamp Blood, increasing the size of that anti-magic shield, popping that and easily surviving that explosion from the boss, especially in this fortified, non-tyrannical setting. But, you know, a bit of sloppiness again. They do have that cauterized proc on Dilemma on the Fire Mage. We do see Edelweiss go down. Of course, the battle res does come up, as you said. Domitrax now 8%. They should have no problem cleaning it up with the 4 bats afterwards. Parse Culture now starting to move up the stairwell to where Dark Slashers is currently.
Yeah, and at this point, Dark Slashers is a full boss ahead. They're still, Parse Culture still is just about to start the RP event. They're having the Druid running up the stairs. That way he will be able to get that going here. And then hopefully this is, you know, the moment where Dark Slashers is able to realize they're missing out on that additional trash percentage, if they haven't already. And if they haven't already, they're kind of rewinding and able to kind of look at, hey, where are we needing that extra trash percentage? Because they are a full boss ahead. They are going to be able to have, you know, almost all their trash percentage at this point here. But it's very important, you know, the second that they are able to take down Mephithroth, to be able to start booking it down the stairs and find some kind of trash that'll give them percent.
Yeah, depending on how the next 2 bosses play out for Parse Culture and just how well Dark Slashers performs on Mephithroth, I mean, this could be, a bit of a stretch, but it could be Parse Culture's saving grace. They're already done with their trash. They're at 96% now. They'll get the remaining 4% from the bats, the ones that Dark Slashers just killed. Dark Slashers has to deal with Mephithroth, which starts in phase 1 here for 40 seconds. Prime time for Bloodlust, which unfortunately they don't have available to them. But they are going to get as much damage in as they can. Mephithroth is going to go off into his second phase, where the tank, usually, will pick up that Aegis, that shield, and protect Illidan in the middle of the room from Mephithroth's shadows that are casting huge purple balls at Illidan's face, wanting to make sure none of them are soaked by Illidan, else the phase will extend by a few seconds, something that I'm sure Parse Culture would love.
They really would, but unfortunately for them, Rev's favorite game is soccer, and he is an incredible goalie, so I do not think that's going to be too much of a problem there for him. At this point, I think it really will start going into just an attrition battle, making sure Edelweiss is just going to be able to keep everybody topped off. The burst damage that comes out from those spires is extremely high there, and that's one of the things you want to see is, you know, I'm not too interested in seeing huge damage going out for Edelweiss as she drops extremely low. They do have 1 battle res left available to them, but it's so important to make sure that they don't actually have to use that if they don't have to here. So at this point, what I'm really looking for is just strong, constant healing onto this group, making sure people are staying spread, avoiding any of the spit that comes out from the bat going overhead right there. At this point, making sure they're not extending this phase, because if they're playing it cleanly, if they're playing it correctly, they will be able to get this down and then get that final trash percentage they desperately need.
Good view here from the observers as we see just how well Rev ends up playing goalie there, blocking all of those orbs onto Illidan. Mephithroth restarting phase 1, which of course is a longer version of the pull at the start, because there he starts with 50 or 60 energy already. Here he will start with 0 energy. Should be able to easily kill the boss within this time frame. We're always keeping an eye on Parse Culture. They've already dealt with 2 of the portals. We see 1 left over, Shavara on the side there, but Domitrax already at 25%. No deaths there to speak on that fight specifically for Parse Culture, so they're shaping up well. But Mephithroth already at 30% here, Jack. After this, they're going to have to just head as quickly as they can downstairs all the way I guess those 2 spiders would be enough all the way past where Nalasha was before they killed her and deal with those last 2 spiders.
Yeah, and that's gonna, looks like it's going to be the percent they need. You are seeing Dilemma going down. That's the last battle res they have available to them. 10 seconds left on Bloodlust going out for them. At this point, I just want to see just raw healing coming out, because they do have to deal with another set of spires coming up, making sure everyone is playing as defensively as possible here. 7% left, of course, on Mephithroth. They just need to make sure they're burning this down, avoiding the phase, and they need to make sure they're able to get back downstairs, find that last trash percentage they're needing here. So they really have to watch out for these Spires if they do run into them, because Clicks does go down. This is something you have to make sure.
And
anytime
boom goes the dynamite.
Anytime you're completing this instance and those Spires are still up, they're still so lethal there. And at this point, they're kind of just keeping an eye on like where is that extra trash percentage. I do believe they've already dropped down and are still going all the way downstairs, skipping past.
They actually did kill the spiders that you thought were up, so they have to run all the way past Thrashbite's room, which they're doing right now. So they have to go all the way down the winding stairs, all the way past his room, and all the way near Agronox's room, where finally they find the remaining trash they need.
And they have Bloodlust.
Immediately pop at Bloodlust. We see it on 4 of the members, of course, not on the mage, which is why you're seeing that cooldown left over. That's only the mage's cooldown. The other 4 members get Bloodlust, and they're rapidly trying to finish off 2 more mobs to get their last 3%, whilst Parse Culture has already started on Mephistroth, but at this point, it's got to be too little too late, Jack.
Yeah, and they get the 99%. They just need to kill one individual thing, and they've got it. Dark Slashers finishing up the instance and sealing the series 2-1 with the reverse sweep again.
If only it was Arclight.
Yeah.
I mean...
All right, well, the thing is with this squad is they've been able to do quite a few reverse sweeps. They're going to be able to